welcome back to Public Affairs. I am your host, Kayleigh Aiken, and today I'm here with Kristie Chandler from the Nourishing Roots Mind, Body, and Spirit Incorporation. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company?
Sure. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And so Nourishing Roots Mind, Body, Spirit Incorporated really came to be because of some life struggles that I went through. But what we are is a wellness nonprofit. We focus on helping motivated, overwhelmed individuals reduce their stress and their anxiety so that they can go out and do the good works that God has called them to do with confidence. We believe that God inherently created us in ways that we can negate a lot of the negative things that happen to our bodies through the stresses that we undergo throughout life, so that we can overcome that to do His good works. And we also believe that heaven is here on earth and that is a very literal thing. And so we have total ability to tap into the Holy Spirit's healing power, and we just need to align ourselves with that and then do some maintenance work, I guess you could say, in order to keep up with that. So through that, I have a board, and then I am the CEO and the wellness coach. There's really nobody other than us. And so I am a nutritionist, a yoga instructor, and I dabble in my free time in brain plasticity and rewiring so that I can help teach how to reduce negative thoughts and help people focus instead what is pure, what is lovely, what is true. And so I guess, yeah, that's kind of the overview.
So why are you here today? What kind of message do you want the audience to be able to pull from this experience?
Well, really, I just want to raise awareness that we're here. So working on getting out and into the communities. We do not have a brick and mortar, so I just travel different places and work with people as it's available. I'm looking to work with church groups, women groups, come to functions and events, partner with schools, really anything that's open and available. My heart is to work with college-age students and find ways to step into that space and really get involved on campus and with organizations like Crew and different religious organizations specifically, but everything that I teach is also scientifically backed. So if we have to step back from the God aspect of things, like there's still a lot of benefit in what I'm able to go out there and teach. So I just want people to know that this is an organization that's around, and we're looking for partnerships and ways to impact our community. I live just outside of Bucyrus, and I'm actually from the Fostoria area, so like northwest to central Ohio is kind of my area. And I really would just love to see what we can do to bring healing to our communities.
Yeah. So you talked about going to schools and everything. How active have you been with the schools? Like, what kind of schools have you gone to already?
As far as who I've worked with?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually we're just getting started. So everything is brand new. We're in the grassroots, just launching off phase of this organization. And so far I have worked with a college-age group from Day Spring Church here in Marion. And I've also actually taught yoga a couple of times at Bucyrus High School, and I'll be working on one of their professional development days here coming up in August, teaching stress reduction for test taking, how to help teachers, help students reduce their stress when it comes times for especially the Ohio State tests. And then I've also partnered with Finding Center, where I taught a workshop called God, Yoga, and Chakras, determining is yoga something safe that Christians can actually practice, and if so, what aspects of it and how could it be redeemed?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't think about it like that. So what are your principal tenets of wellness?
Sure. So when I teach about wellness, I teach about whole, consistent faith. So I think it's really important, like we have amazing medicine in America, and the doctors are incredibly well trained, but most people wait and go to a doctor when they are actually ill. And so they have a disease. And so when we're looking at the state of illness or a state of maintenance, either one, we really need to look at the whole individual. So when we talk whole consistent faith, the whole individual, we have to look at mind, body, and spirit. And if we're not looking at that, like the research that I have done has truly shown that you've got to look at it from a Christian perspective, that when there is physical illness in the body, that has actually manifested over time, and its root is often first spiritual and second emotional. And so there's a lot that can go into that. I was actually just listening to something the other day that was talking about cancer preventatives and how it's really important to be screened early, because by the time you get to a point where you're actually feeling the effects of the disease, you've already had it for a long time. It just got to a point where it is physically presenting in the body. And I believe there's spiritual things that happen through generational curses, through the sheath that we have between us and God, the things that the enemy throws at us that manifest early in life, and they just take a long time before we start feeling them physically, which is how we get to such overwhelmed, overstressed, burned out states, and we have trouble remembering the love of God, remembering that the ability and power of the Holy Spirit to come in. So we've got to look at the whole person. We've got to look at mind, body, spirit. And when body, we've got to look both at physical body, but also the body of Christ. We have to look at who we're supposed to be as the arms and legs. We don't exist as just arms and legs. There's a head, there's a torso, there's other things there. So we've got to be connected. Consistent neuro research has shown that we have to actually practice what we're trying to change multiple times a day. I've seen the magic number being 7. I don't think that's a coincidence. 7 times per day over at least a period. Caroline Leaf is probably my favorite neuroscientist that I'm reading right now, and she says over 63 days. And what that does is when you consistently immerse yourself in the agape love of Christ and think on the positive, pure, lovely things that he says to concentrate on multiple times throughout the day over that span of time, then your brain will actually start to prune or remove the old negative pathways and create the new positive ones. So God actually, when it says in the Bible that we are to rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, it's literally finally science is catching up and showing that there is biological evidence that works.
Yeah.
So that's the consistency part. If we're going to start something, we have to do it often, and we have to do it over time before it just becomes a part of who we are. And then faith. We have to operate in, I think, 2 types of faith. One, the faith that we have a God who absolutely loves us, and he is here, and he is actively working, and his Holy Spirit is here on earth now as it is in heaven. And what we're doing is working because God's got us. And it might not always be the end result we think it's going to be, because that's not how God works.
Yeah.
But we have to have faith that God has a redemption story for us, and that we're going to walk fully in that light, and that he has a plan for us, and that what we're doing is going to put us in a place where we can fully walk in his glories so that we can do his good kingdom work.
Wow, I just learned a lot right there. A lot to unpack, just that. I'm sorry. That was just, I didn't even really think of it like that, because you said your body works. You're not just arms and legs, you're a whole thing, and it connects with everything around you and who you are. So what is your mission and vision statement, and why?
Sure. So our mission is to help motivated, overwhelmed individuals release that stress and anxiety so that they can go out and with good health and confidence change the world in the name of Christ. So we want them to be able to go out and do that. And our vision is truly that we have a wellness revival, that people believe in and see the power, the healing power of Christ, that he is the great physician, that we can have miraculous healings, and we can also have just the innate way that he made us, that we can have healings through that too, that we can be set free, that we can be broken from strongholds, and that we can go out and declare his name as truly omniscient, all-powerful in the world.
Wow. So we already talked about who you had worked with before. So what do you teach when you're at work with a client one-on-one?
Sure. So do you actually mind if, before I go there, if I kind of back up and tell my origin story? Because it's going to explain why I teach what I teach when I'm with people.
Absolutely.
So I have a 6-year-old, and when she was still in my womb, actually, I was married to somebody different than I am now. And while I was pregnant, I had actually just moved. I was a teacher prior to that. I had taught in South Carolina for 9 years, and when I got my master's degree in integrated curriculum, which was at Covenant College, in the very first place that I learned about really looking at a person from every single aspect instead of just, we said a head on a stick, as we get a lot in the education world. When I got my master's degree, my husband didn't like it in South Carolina, so we decided we're going to move back home. And it was definitely a move that God wanted. I sold my house in a day. I got a job right away, and we moved back. And when we moved back, I had a new job. I had a raise, so we bought a car. We moved in with my dad. We got pregnant right away. Shouldn't have been able to get pregnant because I have PCOS, I have an autoimmune disease, and I had maybe 2 periods a year. And so, like, literally within 2 months of trying, we got pregnant. We had been married 7 years. We had never tried. Bam. But it was because God knew. So we were living with my dad, and we were house shopping. And my husband at the time, he took me out in the car one day, and we were sitting there, and he said, "I have something I need to tell you. I tried to cheat on you." And so I looked at him, and with a grace of God that I have never felt before or since, I looked at him and I said, "I forgive you. We're going to work this out, right?" And he said, yeah, we're going to work this out. And so I'm like, well, should we keep house shopping? Like, that seems, are you going to leave like 2 months afterwards? Like, what's going on? And he's like, nope, it's going to be okay. Let's go ahead. So we also bought a house. The house was supposed to close on June 30th. I was super pregnant. I was due like 4 days after that. And so miracle upon miracles, because this never happens, the mortgage broker was able to get us to close on June 15th. My daughter was born on June 30th.
Oh, my.
Yes. And 5 months later, my husband walked to me one morning. He said, "I'm leaving." And so anybody who has heard of ACEs before, they're basically adverse life experiences. There's only a certain amount of stress that somebody can handle before they just break. So I was in a new job with a new baby and a new house and a new car payment, and now I was a single mom. And I had never changed a diaper before I had this baby. I had never held a baby before I had this baby. I had no idea what I was doing. And I came into all of this already with an autoimmune disease, which wears the body down pretty hard. And so he left at Thanksgiving. In January, one night, I got really, really ill, and I just vomited for a few hours. And my neighbors, we were given that house because my neighbors adopted us and took care of us. And they came down, and one watched Ray, and the other got me to the hospital, and they pumped fluids in me, and they said, "It was just a stomach virus, you're fine, go home." And so I did. And when I was able to start eating again, I was in so much pain that I just curled up in the fetal position. And I couldn't really take care of myself. I couldn't really take care of my daughter. Like, I just didn't want to move. And one day I was actually I was working for the North Central Ohio ESC at the time, and I was a consultant in different schools. And I walked into one of the buildings, and the superintendent was walking in at the same time. And he said, like, he just looked at me, and he's like, "Kristie, go home. You are obviously sick." And I'm like, "Fred, I feel like this every single day. Let me in." And so I battled with that for a long time. And eventually, through different routes, I found a quasi-functional doctor, and they did allergy testing on me. And we found out that I was allergic to, they only tested for 7 things. And we found out I was allergic to milk, eggs, wheat, sugar, and corn. So literally everything in processed foods. Mm-hmm. And I found out later that it was the eggs and avocado that were laying me out. And so I had to completely change everything about my diet. And I was losing milk. I was breastfeeding my daughter. I was losing milk. I would, through the graciousness of my jobs, I could pump a lot, but I would be pumping 5 times a day while I was at work. And I remember one day I was sitting in the closet at one of my schools, and like there's just barely anything coming out. And that night I went back home, and I just got down on my knees in the kitchen, and I put my hands up, and I said, okay, I can't make milk come out anymore. I can't keep up with anything. I can't feed me. I can't feed my daughter. I can't do this on my own. And I finally gave everything up to God, like just full surrender. And I knew at that moment that I was in a deep, deep, dark pit, and there was a pinprick of light somewhere up above, and that pinprick of light that I could sometimes see and I could sometimes not was my redemption story. And someday I would live in the full measure of that redemption story. And so fast forward through time, I went and got my nutritionist certification, and I tried to heal my body and all those things that were happening through supplementation and diet. Like anybody who ever tries to eat with me can tell you I'm very difficult to eat with because I'm very, very cautious about what goes into my body. And so it helps some, but not all the way. And then during COVID, I had started doing some yoga, so my husband suggested I go ahead and get my yoga certification. So I went ahead and did that, gave me something to do, and it taught me a lot. And yoga and Christianity, sometimes there's just like, don't turn off the TV. There's sometimes bad words, and I understand that. But what happened was I learned a lot about the universal laws that God put into place and how they work within our body and how other people took them and misconstrued them and attributed them to their own gods. It's just like an atheist discovered molecular parts, like the parts of an atom. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. Mm-hmm. It just means that somebody who doesn't believe in God was able to find that through general revelation. And so I started understanding a little bit more about how our bodies interact in this world in not just a purely biological way. And then so I started incorporating some of those things with the nutrition and things. Again, they got a little bit better, but still not all the way better. And so I had gotten remarried in the middle of that, and I started really, what God started showing me was there was a lot of repentance that needed done in my life. There are a lot of strongholds that I had. There are a lot of spiritual ties that I had. There was some deliverance that I needed. And I'm still not fully on the other side. I am not fully healed. I still have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I still struggle in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. But I knew back when I was in that dark pit that God was going to show me something, and I was going to be able to use that to help other people. And so now when people come and they work with me, we start everything. If I'm going to work one-on-one with somebody, it has to be agape love first. Everything is based on the foundation of agape love. We've got to get right with the Father before anything else, because it's only through our relationship with Him that we're going to find the full manifestation of everything else. And once we're with the agape love, and that can be as simple as spending more time with Him. What kind of time we spend with Him? What does it mean to be in the Word? What does it mean to be with God? It really just depends on where somebody comes in and what their faith is. But it can also mean declarations every day. So every day I make the declarations, by your stripes I am healed. And I have faith, whole consistent faith. I have faith that is real. And once we get that as the foundation, we move to brain plasticity and rewiring. So how do we take the negative thoughts, the fear tree that the enemy has just helped abound within us, and turn it into the love tree of God, so that we know scientifically how to actually focus on what is pure, what is lovely, what is true, and get our brains to reorient down that path in a very biological way, as well as a very spiritual way. And then we'll also work with nutrition. We'll work with what we put in our body, but we also will work with fasting and talk about nutritional fasting and spiritual fasting. And then also just movement. And it doesn't have to be yoga, it can be any kind of movement, because science has shown that if you move even once every 20 minutes through your day, if you just get up and take 2 minutes to go literally move, you will add longevity to your life. So just how to incorporate that based on the individual person, because every single thing is what we call bio-individual, or in the education field you would say differentiated, but it just basically means that every single person is an individual and has individual needs and an individual route that they need to come to these things from.
Yeah. It's really a whole circle moment right there. The way you started out to the way starting your business and the way teaching one-on-one with someone. So you've shared about suffering from anxiety. Tell us more about that and how God has released you.
So through the whole period of college, actually through my marriage and beyond, I suffered from really extreme anxiety. So bad that in my first marriage, when my husband worked second shift, I would be lying in bed at night and I would be like, oh, a spider bit me. And I lived in South Carolina. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it was a black widow or a brown recluse. I'm going to die. And I would literally have to convince myself not to call 911. Like, it was that bad. I would struggle breathing. I would have all sorts of issues. I lived in South Carolina for 9 years. I never went to the mountains. Never. I went to the ocean 2 or 3 times because I was so terrified of traveling anywhere. And so it was crippling. And so after my first husband left, of course, I had the anxiety too. And so I remember I would travel to schools that were a little outside of my normal periphery. I would have such a bad anxiety attack the whole time that I literally would have to struggle to get every single breath the entire time I was traveling, the entire time I was there, the entire time I came back. And once I got home, I was in my safe place. So I was okay. I could breathe again. And so God has just really liberated and freed me and showed me through these things that I teach other people now how to release that from my life. And so he showed me how to use for me, it was visualizations tied with a specific breathing pattern remember, whole consistent faith, at consistent times throughout the day, but specific times too, to it released me. So tying those things together and doing it, especially when I was super stressed, which happened doing the dishes for some reason that gave me panic attacks, I was actually liberated to the point where for my full-time job, we traveled. We go to Annapolis, to Dallas, to Las Vegas, to Boston, to Scottsdale. I've gone all those places without a single panic attack, because God has just liberated me from that anxiety and taken it from my life by the combination of those different practices that I now utilize to help other people as well. So I'm incredibly thankful for that blessing.
Yeah. So what do you teach when you work with an organization or put on a workshop for someone? So
I'm really working to try to find more ways to step into workplaces, churches, organizations, schools. And so what I've done is on my website, which is Nourishing Roots, mindbodyspirit.com. I know it's really long. There's a services tab, and on it I have what I call menus. And so what they have are different offerings of just ideas. It's a place to start more than anything else, but ideas of what we could do if we walk in and work together. So for example, I'm going to be working out, I'm going to say this date wrong, I'm going to be working with Rise Church in Marion with the women's group on June 15th. Anybody is invited from 10 to 12, and we're going to be doing stress less and Christian yoga. So we will be looking at the simple view of stress. Participants will learn how our brain works from the way atheists sometimes describe it. I don't know how else to say that, sorry. But scientifically, they call it like the reptilian brain. Like, I think, yes, there's a little bit of how we've changed and evolved over time, but they say the brain that we had when we were not people, but the old brain, the reptilian brain, all the way up to the more functioning brain. So as educators, we always joke, teenagers make bad decisions because their prefrontal cortex has not fully evolved yet. And so talking about like that limbic system brain and how we just react to things all the way to where we can actually think about it. And they'll learn about how that impacts the stressors that come into our life, as well as the stress bucket. So what are the stressors that we're carrying around? How heavy do those feel, and how do we release them? And then some simple strategies. So that's that like one little tiny menu option squeezed into an hour. So other menu options would be like the 5 M's of wellness. So maker, mindfulness, mouth, membership, movement. So basically those things I've already described, but with, fun alliteration. Sleeping better, anxiety busters, smart snacking, yoga and movement. I even can do some on like trust and value, how to build trust, how to build value between people, just from other trainings that I have had through the work that I do other places.
Yeah. So obviously you do a lot. How can people contact you for more information?
Absolutely. So you can either email me at Kristie, Kristie, at nourishingrootsmindbodyspirit.com, or you can go to the website nourishingrootsmindbodyspirit.com, and there's a form on there that you can fill out. There's also a place there for donations. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and so any donations that are made are tax deductible. A lot of our events, we ask for either a donation, which is what we're doing at Rise, or I have a suggested price. So when we did God, Yoga, and Chakras at Finding Center, it was a suggested donation. And so anything above the suggestion, you can also claim on your taxes, because the suggested price would be the value of what it's for.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So as we're obviously getting ready to wrap up this interview, is there anything you'd like to add or a closing statement you want to finish off with for the audience?
I just want to say, if you've hung with me this long, thank you. And I would really love to figure out like what we can do to make a great impact. Please consider coming to the women's group at Rise Church on June 15th from 10 to 12. I'm also going to be sharing my testimony again at the Fan the Flame event in August. It's going to be a huge 3-day celebration, August 16th, 17th, and 18th at the Marion Coliseum. This is not something you want to miss. So make sure to come out and be a part of that ministry as well. But I would love to hear from anyone and everyone, even if you just have questions. So please feel free to reach out at any time.
Well, thank you for coming out. I learned a lot, so I know the audience definitely learned a lot from you, and I hope they take advantage of your opportunity that you're giving them. So again, thank you. And as always, you are watching Public Affairs, and I am your host, Kayleigh Aiken.